Hey, Jeannie, who's our guest on the Energy Nerd Show today?
Today we have Julia Prochnik, founder and CEO of Jess Energies.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
So what are we talking about today?
I'm really excited to be here. This is such an important time when we are starting to really understand the importance of climate change and how our electric grid is interconnected and kind of is such a key component of our economy. And I'm really excited to share all these new things I'm working on that are all like a web. We get so worked up in our silos where I thought it'd be really exciting to talk about the transmission grid, the us as customers, our electricity, taking it for granted, the affordability component, equity component, and also, as we transition from a fossil fuel grid to a more clean energy economy, what does that look like for local communities? And also, if we're bringing on all these renewables, how are they going to work and where are we going to store the clean energy? And so all these different components I'm really excited to talk about today with you.
Let's jump in. That's a big agenda. Where should we start?
I think we should start with why energy, why all these pieces. And I don't know if you can see it, but I even have a transmission tower in my corner because for over 20 years, I've been working in energy and I kind of fell into the importance of the electric grid. And I got to work on the 2003 blackout and, that took over 8 states and 3 Canadian provinces and was, over $8 billion of economic devastation, including 11 lives were lost. And it was really intense to kind of see, my gosh, we lose power. What does it do to all of our economies and our communities? And it was right after 9/11. So there was also the scare of, my gosh, is this connected to that? And so I think, we're not good planners and we kind of forget things that happen in the history. And so as we move forward, I thought it's nice to kind of revisit an event that happened in 2003 that took all of our lights away in our worlds and disruption. And then we had to kind of move forward. And I feel like moving into new policies to help us adapt to change and working on how do we push forward. I feel like we're in that same kind of nexus again with this push to start fighting climate change and to really start looking at what our current infrastructure is and how we have to do so many updates and how we have to make very big changes. And so when we look at the electric grid, transmission is a big part of it. And when you're driving on the freeway or you're walking, out in nature, you sometimes see these transmission lines. And like, what is that? Well, that's delivering all of our power to us. And, so we can turn our lights on and so we can, have heat and air conditioning and have our phones charged. So it's really important that we have some of these infrastructures. But I think there's a nexus and a balance, kind of like everything is that we need this infrastructure, but we need to put it in the right locations. We can't have it be a spaghetti map across our entire country. We can't have it be in national parks or in sensitive lands or in tribal areas. So, what type of opportunities do we have to be part of the participation so we build this new infrastructure in the right locations? If you fast forward, 15 years, it's been interesting to kind of work on the blackout and work on siting the transmission lines and working with utilities and different stakeholders to look at how do you build the grid of the future.
Is that something that Jess Energy does in terms of, getting involved in the grid proceedings?
Yes, we do a variety of things. When I started the company, it was really important to build on the different areas of expertise. So spending time at US Department of Energy and spending time at the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, I really got involved in building electricity policy and making sure that mandatory reliability standards for the grid were realistic and also enforceable. And so there's the energy side, which is really important. And then there's also in our industry, there are still not enough women and people of color, and we really need to do a lot of uplifting and opening doors and bringing down other doors. And so our organization works with different women's groups, with different groups of color, with various organizations to make sure that we all know about each other. There's a lot of us, and it's just really connecting more assets, more conversations, more individuals to the information, providing more access and uplifting a lot of amazing work that's already been done that's not getting enough credit. And then the third area is the structure. It's looking also at storage and, how do we educate and inform why we need all these different new technologies and why we need to build on the existing technology. So it's technology, it's coordination, access, and it's expertise in the energy world. So it's a lot of fun being able to wear different hats that speak to different interests of the grid.
And it's all really important stuff. Is the access and the equity work, is that national or is it more focused regionally?
Great question. It is a national topic. It's an international topic. And from the years I've worked on this, it's been mainly Western interconnection focused, so the 11 Western states, because of the amount of coal plants and because of the work I was doing, working with utilities and starting to see that we're planning the grid 5-10 years out. And I'm starting to notice that coal plants are retiring 5 or even 7 years, possibly even 10 years earlier than their expected retirement date. and realizing that the funding in these communities where their tax base was built on the fossil fuel economy was starting to disappear, and suddenly in some areas. And so how to make this transition more equitable. And what I was also realizing is this isn't just an urban and rural issue. This is also a tribal issue. This is, there's so many components to this that we need to have very focused conversations. And it really has to come from the local voice. So, working with a variety of organizations, the Just Transition Fund, the Center for New Energy Economy, Union of Concerned Scientists, the Blue Green Alliance, Natural Resources Defense Council, where I previously worked, Rocky Mountain Institute. All these different organizations are working really hard on making sure that we are able to have policies in place that are now more equitable and provide the resources that the local communities want. When I used to work for the federal government, oh, we're here from, the government, we're here to help. It was like, no, you're not listening to us. We want this, but we don't want this. And so it's this new conversation about, okay, we're all here to work together. We all want to sit at the table. We need to bring new voices to the table. And now we need to make something that actually is workable. It doesn't degrade what I did, doesn't demote what I did, but makes, us all start looking at a future where we can be more collaborative together. It sounds a lot easier than it is, but it's really difficult to have these very important and complicated conversations because respect is so key. I think we take for granted that our country was built on so many negatives and that we need to acknowledge these negatives and kind of really turn them over to realize they're more positive. So fossil communities, this is their livelihood. This is what they've done. And it's a really important part and we should be proud of this. It's not, we should not be attacking because it's a dirty fuel. And so it's changing that mindset and conversation about working together with our communities. This is what the future looks like, but we have to work together. We have to be equitable. We have to define what that means because it's not the same in each community. And we really need to, make sure that we are not just building the right policies, but making sure we're being consistent in implementing them and that we're showing up. Showing up is key. And so that's a big part too, is that continuity for the relationship building.
I 100% agree. It's really hard work. It's really time consuming, but it's of the utmost importance. So I'm really glad to hear it's something that you're working on. You talked about the 2003 blackout, and then our friend Shalonda Baker was on a podcast recently and mentioned additional deaths because of shutoffs during the period of COVID. And I don't remember the statistic that she mentioned, but it kind of, makes me wonder, like when you pivoted, well, it sounds like you kind of reshifted your focus after kind of seeing the tragedies that are connected to an unreliable grid. I'm really interested in like your journey. Like what did that pivot look like?
Thank you for the question. And Shonda's work is amazing. And it's really important to focus on the inequities. So many gas plants and fossil fuel plants and mines and infrastructure are placed in frontline and disadvantaged communities and tribal reservations and tribal and sovereign nations. There's a huge bias there. And as we were trying to build a new future, I did not want to be part of the problem of saying, oh, this worked in the past, we have to do the same thing again. It didn't work in the past. There were so many discrepancies and so many bias policies and so many inequities that just had to be changed. And so, if you look at COVID now and you look at where the gas plants were running more or the air pollution and the healthcare economy, it's still disproportionate. So there are still those inequities that we've got to fix. It's devastating. It can't be any longer. And more of white individuals need to kind of step up and start, really kind of acknowledging that the privilege that we've had and we still have today, we need to start acknowledging it and moving forward so we can stop addressing the inequities and start addressing the racist policies that existed that we need to change. And so the Just and Equitable Transition Coalition that many of us from the Western advocate and energy community, environmental community kind of formed really does start combining these components of equity, components of dealing with racism, and components of changing the infrastructure of the grid. Having these conversations where a lot of organizations, Climate Equity for Justice, CEJA, the Green Lighting Institute, a lot of the groups in Colorado, there are so many entities out there that are working on this. It's now trying to uplift all the voices so that we don't reinvent the wheel. We make sure we do the right policies and that we have the conversation so that we know we're not alone.
That's great. We've got to get more of those people on the show.
I hope so. There's many of us, you just got to reach out. I think that's the other thing too, is we assume, oh, we've checked the box, but I think there are so many people of color and tribal organizations that are working on this and have been for a long time. And we just need to open the door. So yes, I'm more than happy to make sure that you have a huge list of names and organizations. In the various conversations with policymakers, we have some exciting new technologies that are coming to the forefront with batteries and short-term storage and long-term storage. We've had infrastructure around like pumped hydro for, almost a century and even over a century in some areas. 100 years of building infrastructure that works. It's exciting to see where we're going. I hope we have parallel paths where we keep pushing on, things that work and evolving and improving. And then we open up the markets and have procurement mechanisms and policies to encourage new development that can address some of the, inequities, and really does start looking at both, local grid reliability for microgrids and distribution, and then also for system-wide reliability for the grid, where you have transmission and other components that need to be part of this. It's exciting to see so many different players in the utility world, with community choice aggregators and traditional utilities and publicly owned utilities, and the conversations that are starting to change about, what are my needs and what are their needs and what are our needs as a system. And I think it's really important to value all these different components, but at the same time, not be siloed in our integrated planning and the need to take transformative action.
So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you again for this opportunity. It's wonderful to connect the dots. I just really appreciate the dialogue and the opportunity to share so much work that so many great groups are doing. And I just appreciate the momentum. So thank you both so much.
Thanks, Julia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.